Prologue: the god beneath the waves. Beneath the roar of crashing tides and the fury of ocean storms, one god held dominion over the ever-changing sea. As a central figure in Greek mythology, Poseidon was not merely the god of the ocean. Like his siblings, he was swallowed at birth by Cronus, who feared being overthrown by his offspring. When Zeus, the youngest, escaped this fate and forced Cronus to regurgitate his siblings, Poseidon was reborn into a world at war. The siblings fought together in the Titanomachia tenure battle against the Titans. With the Titans defeated, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, divided the world by drawing lots. Poseidon received the sea, a realm of great beauty and terrifying force. He was the force behind earthquakes, the master of horses, and a relentless power among the Olympian gods. Known for his tempestuous nature and vast influence, Poseidon's mythos stretches from the depths of Atlantis to the heights of Mount Olympus. This chapter introduces Poseidon's origins, his rise to power, and the traits that defined him as both a feared and worshipped deity. His stories are rooted in ancient literature and archaeological evidence, tracing the path of a god who shaped the land, the sea, and the fate of mortals. Poseidon was one of the 6 children of Cronus and Rhea. Depicted with a trident in hand, Poseidon was believed to stir the ocean's fury with a single thrust. Greek mariners prayed to him for calm waters, while those who offended him often faced shipwrecks and destruction. In Linear B tablets from Mycenaean Greece, dating back to the 13th century BC, his name already appeared as Poseidon, indicating that his worship predates even the classical myths. This suggests his divine role was essential to early Greek identity, especially in coastal and island communities. His personality was complex, brave, proud, vengeful, yet capable of generosity. Temples were built in his honor, such as the Grand Sanctuary at Cape Sunion. His conflicts with other gods, his children both monstrous and heroic, and the ways ancient cultures honored or feared his unpredictable power, where offerings were made to appease his wrath. Beyond mythology, Poseidon's image endured through centuries of seafaring civilizations. This chapter sets the stage for a deep exploration into Poseidon's mythological influence. The wrath of the Trident, Poseidon's power and temperament. Poseidon was not a passive deity. His domain was vast, but so was his fury. Among all Olympians, his temper was one of the most feared. Storms, shipwrecks, floods, and earthquakes were believed to be expressions of his anger. This chapter explores the destructive and commanding aspects of Poseidon's nature, how he enforced his authority, punished mortals and gods alike, and carved his legend into myth. Poseidon's trident was more than a symbol. It was a weapon of divine creation. Forged by the Cyclopes during the Titanomachy, this 3-pronged spear had the power to shatter mountains and stir the sea into chaos. Both gods desired to be the patron of a powerful city. Poseidon struck the earth and created a saltwater spring or, in some versions, a horse. Athena, in turn, offered the olive tree, useful, peaceful, and enduring. The people of this city, later named Athens, chose Athena's gift. Humiliated, Poseidon cursed the land with drought and continued to oppose Athena's followers in later myths. This story reveals the god's competitive and proud character, often unwilling to concede defeat. One of the most notable examples of his fury came during the conflict with the Trojans. Angered by King Laomedon's broken promise after helping build the walls of Troy, Poseidon sent a sea monster to ravage the city. Only the sacrifice of Princess Hesione stopped the destruction, and even then, the god's pride remained wounded. His rivalry with Athena is another crucial tale. His interactions with mortals could be equally harsh. When the Phaeacians helped Odysseus return home, Poseidon turned their ship to stone as punishment for aiding a man he had vowed to hinder. This obsession with respect and revenge shows how vital honor and obedience were to the sea god. Yet, he was not without moments of kindness. He granted King Minos of Crete a majestic white bull, and once calmed the seas for Aeneas in Roman adaptations, illustrating a duality in his temperament. Ancient Greeks regarded Poseidon as a necessary danger, respected but never trusted. His dominion was unpredictable, like the ocean itself. Rituals and sacrifices were conducted to ensure safe passage at sea, particularly before voyages and naval battles. The trident, prominently displayed in temples and statues, served as a constant reminder of the cost of his displeasure. This chapter paints a clear portrait of Poseidon's strength, and pride. His identity that defined his role as a deity, feared even by his fellow Olympians. Poseidon and his offspring. The makers of myth. Poseidon's legacy extended far beyond his rule of the sea. Through numerous affairs with nymphs, mortals, and goddesses, he fathered a vast lineage of children, some noble, others monstrous. These offspring played pivotal roles in the mythological world. A son of Poseidon and the sea nymph Medusa, Polyphemus was brutish and violent. After Odysseus blinded him, Poseidon unleashed relentless storms to delay the hero's return home. This vendetta reveals how deeply Poseidon cared for his children, even those viewed as monstrous by others, and through them, Poseidon's influence rippled across the mortal and divine realms. This chapter examines the origins and impact of his most significant sons and daughters. Among Poseidon's most famous children is Theseus, the legendary hero of Athens, born from Poseidon's union with Ithra. Theseus was often considered his divine heritage endowed him with strength and courage, traits that helped him slay the Minotaur and unify Attica. Poseidon's favor toward Theseus is shown in several myths, including the one where Theseus proves his parentage by retrieving a ring thrown into the sea, aided by sea creatures and nymphs, who recognized him as the god's son. In stark contrast stands Polyphemus, the Cyclops encountered by Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey. Another of Poseidon's children is Triton, often depicted as a merman with the upper body of a man and the tail of a fish. Triton served as his father's herald, calming or stirring the seas with the blow of a conch shell. In Roman and Hellenistic art, Triton often appears beside Poseidon, symbolizing the god's command over aquatic forces. He created heroes who protected civilizations and monsters that threatened them. Through them, Poseidon's character, proud, wild, and bound to the sea, was echoed across mythic landscapes. Poseidon was also the father of Pegasus, the winged horse, born from the blood of Medusa, after she was slain by Perseus. Though an unusual birth, Pegasus became a symbol of divine inspiration and heroic endeavor. The creature later helped the hero Bellerophon defeat the Chimera, further extending Poseidon's mythic reach. His many children, both divine and terrifying, illustrate Poseidon's complex nature as a progenitor. This chapter underscores Poseidon's role not only as a god of nature, but as a shaper of destiny through the lives of his descendants. Rivalries of Olympus. Poseidon among the gods. Poseidon was not a solitary ruler of the deep. He stood as one of the 12 Olympians, sharing power and status with gods and goddesses whose ambitions often clashed with his own. His relationships on Mount Olympus were marked by alliances, betrayals, and open defiance. This chapter explores Poseidon's complex interactions with the other gods, especially his tense dynamics with Zeus, Hades, and Athena. Poseidon was Zeus's brother and Hades' equal. After the defeat of the Titans, the three divided the cosmos, Zeus ruling the sky, Hades, the underworld, and Poseidon, the sea. Their contest over Athens remains one of the most iconic tales in Greek mythology. Even after losing the city's patronage to Athena, Poseidon never relinquished his grudge. He supported enemies of Athens in numerous wars, and often sided with gods or mortals opposing her. Their ideological contrast to Poseidon's raw force versus Athena's strategy symbolized the balance of power in myth, and reflected deeper themes of nature versus civilization. Though bound by blood and power, Poseidon and Zeus frequently quarreled. One of the most significant examples occurred when Poseidon conspired with Hera and Athena to overthrow Zeus. Angered by his brother's arrogance and authoritarian rule, Poseidon helped chain Zeus to his throne. The plan ultimately failed, and when Thetis brought Briareus to free the king of the gods, Zeus punished the conspirators. Poseidon was forced to serve King Laomedon of Troy, building the city's great walls alongside Apollo as penance. The rivalry between Poseidon and Athena endured for generations. His relationship with Hades was more distant than hostile. While Hades remained in the underworld, Poseidon ruled the oceans. However, during disputes over territory or mortal souls, their paths sometimes crossed. In Orphic traditions, some texts suggest Poseidon's role in the cycle of death and rebirth, linking him indirectly to the underworld and Hades' domain. Poseidon's authority among gods was reinforced by his power, not diplomacy. He was respected, but not always loved. His temperament made cooperation difficult. Yet in times of crisis, such as during the battle against the giants, Poseidon fought alongside the Olympians with unmatched fury. His clashes were not only personal but symbolic of the broader tensions among the forces that shaped the ancient world, using his trident to crush his foes and restore divine order. This chapter reveals Poseidon as a god who refused submission even to Zeus and remained fiercely independent. The cult of Poseidon, worship, temples, and rituals. Poseidon was not only feared for his power, but revered through organized worship that spanned centuries. Coastal cities, island communities, and inland sanctuaries honored him with temples, sacrifices, and festivals. This chapter delves into how ancient civilizations expressed their devotion to Poseidon, the types of rituals performed in his name, and the sacred spaces built to channel his presence. Worship of Poseidon began long before the classical Greek period. Evidence from the linear bead tablets of Mycenaean palaces, built in the 5th century BCE, this sanctuary served as a sacred landmark for sailors. Before embarking on dangerous voyages, mariners would offer prayers and animal sacrifices, hoping to earn the god's favor for calm seas and safe passage. The temple's location, visible from great distances, reminded travelers that Poseidon's gaze followed them wherever they sailed. Dating back to around 1200 BC, show Poseidon recorded as Poseidon as one of the most prominent deities, possibly even more important than Zeus during that era. He was seen as the earth-shaker, tied to both the land and the sea, making him vital to communities vulnerable to earthquakes and floods. Among the most renowned temples dedicated to Poseidon is the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sut, perched on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. In the Peloponnesus, Poseidon was worshipped at the Isthmus of Corinth, where the Isthmian Games were held in his honor every 2 years, the most valuable sacrificial offering. In Thessaly, one of Greece's largest plains and a hub of horse breeding, stallions were driven into rivers as acts of devotion. While this may seem brutal today, it reflected the seriousness with which Poseidon's wrath was feared and the value placed on appeasing him. These games included athletic competitions, music, and horse races symbolizing Poseidon's dual roles as god of horses and sea. His connection to horses was so strong that in many myths, he is credited with creating the first horse Skyphios by striking the earth with his trident. Poseidon's rituals often included the drowning of horses. Poseidon's cult was not limited to mainland Greece. Colonies in southern Italy, North Africa, and Asia Minor built altars and held festivals in his name, often merging local traditions with Hellenic practices. This wide geographic reverence reinforced Poseidon's image as a pan-Hellenic god, connecting scattered Greek communities through shared belief and ritual. This chapter highlights the deep spiritual and cultural role Poseidon played, not just as a mythological figure but as a god woven into the daily lives of those who lived at the mercy of the sea and earth. Myths of control, Poseidon, and natural disasters. Poseidon was more than a sea deity. He was the embodiment of natural chaos. Earthquakes, floods, and tsunamis were all within his command. In this chapter, we explore how the ancient Greeks used Poseidon to explain natural disasters and how these beliefs shaped their understanding of the world as unpredictability. One of Poseidon's most significant epithets was Enosekhthin, meaning earth-shaker. His control over earthquakes was deeply feared. Ancient Greeks, particularly those living near fault lines or on volcanic islands, attributed tremors and land collapses to his anger. When cities were destroyed by quakes, it was believed they had dishonored the sea god. These interpretations offered a divine cause to sudden catastrophes that otherwise lacked explanation in the pre-scientific world. The island of Delos is sacred to Apollo and Artemis, was said to have floated in the sea until Poseidon struck it with his trident, anchoring it firmly. This act not only demonstrated his ability to move land masses, but also suggested his role in shaping the very geography of Greece. The myth reflects the real tectonic volatility of the Aegean region and the reverence with which Poseidon's power over land and sea was regarded. Flood myths also featured prominently. In one tale, Poseidon, angered by humanity's disrespect for the gods, unleashed a flood alongside Zeus. This myth closely resembles the Mesopotamian and biblical flood stories, showing how natural calamities were universally tied to divine retribution. In Greek versions, Deucalion and Pyrrha survived the flood, suggesting a recurring theme of renewal through divine wrath. Volcanic activity was also attributed to Poseidon, especially in places like Thera, though later associated more with Hephaestus. Early beliefs often linked seismic eruptions and oceanic disturbances to Poseidon's domain. His storms could swallow entire fleets. Poseidon's role helped ancient Greeks accept the dangers of their environment, offering both a target for their prayers and an explanation for their tragedies, as seen in the myth of Ajax the Lesser, who insulted the gods and was killed by Poseidon in a sudden tempest. His ship crushed against the rocks. The psychological function of these myths was clear. They gave human-like motivation to the unpredictable forces of nature. This chapter illustrates Poseidon as a personification of nature's violent unpredictability. Gods were not always protectors, but forces to be survived. Poseidon's love affairs, desire, conflict, and consequences. Poseidon's mythology is filled with passion, jealousy, and divine seduction. His romantic pursuits were as forceful as his storms, often leaving lasting marks on the mortal and divine realms. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, Poseidon violated Medusa in Athena's temple. In response, Athena cursed Medusa, transforming her into a gorgon with serpents for hair and a gaze that turned men to stone. This myth reflects more than divine drama. It illustrates the imbalance of power between gods and mortals, and the tragic consequences of divine lust. This chapter explores Poseidon's many affairs, their consequences, and what they reveal about his character in the broader scope of Greek myth. He also shared genuine affection with Amphitrite, a sea goddess, and one of the initially reluctant, Amphitrite fled to avoid his advances, hiding in the depths of the ocean. Poseidon eventually sent a dolphin to persuade her, and when she returned, he made her queen of the sea. The dolphin was later honored as a constellation. Amphitrite's myth is one of the few examples of Poseidon's devotion leading to a lasting union, and she is often depicted beside him on his throne, wearing a crown of seaweed. One of Poseidon's most famous relationships was with Medusa, originally a beautiful priestess of Athena. Poseidon's romantic entanglements were not limited to violence. Another noteworthy affair involved Demeter, goddess of the harvest. To escape Poseidon's pursuit, Demeter transformed into a mare and hid among horses. Tyro, a mortal princess, was deceived by Poseidon when he disguised himself as her husband. Unlike the calculated love affairs of Apollo or the romantic idealism of Eros, Poseidon's relationships were chaotic, leaving behind gods, monsters, heroes, and sorrow. Their children, Peleus and Neleus, became kings who shaped heroic lineages. Stories like this highlight Poseidon's recurring role in founding dynasties, willingly or by force. Undeterred, Poseidon took the form of a stallion and caught her. From their union was born Arion, a divine horse capable of speech. This myth not only connects Poseidon to horses, but reinforces his relentless nature in both desire and power. Poseidon's many mortal lovers often bore children who influenced myths for generations. These tales underscore Poseidon's raw and unpredictable nature, not just as a god of the sea, but of untamed emotion and primal instinct. This chapter shows how Poseidon's desires shaped both the divine and mortal world, often leaving beauty and destruction in their wake. Atlantis and Poseidon, a lost kingdom and its divine founder. Among the most enduring legends tied to Poseidon is the tale of Atlantis, a mythical island said to have sunk beneath the ocean in a single day and night. In his dialogues Timaeus and Creatios, written in the 4th century BCE, the island was rich in resources, with fertile land, powerful armies, and unmatched architecture. Poseidon blessed it with hot and cold springs, abundant animals, and natural defenses. The Atlanteans initially lived in harmony, honoring the gods and upholding justice. However, over generations, they became prideful and corrupt, turning away from divine law. In punishment, the gods led by Zeus destroyed the island, submerging it beneath the ocean. According to Plato, Poseidon fell in love with a mortal woman named Clito, who lived on an isolated hill on a distant island. To protect her, Poseidon surrounded the hill with concentric rings of land and sea, creating the foundation of Atlantis. He built a grand palace at the center and made Clito his queen. Together, they had 10 sons, who became the rulers of the island's 10 regions. The eldest, Atlas, gave the island its name and became its first king. While often treated as a philosophical allegory, the myth of Atlantis links directly to Poseidon, who is believed to be the island's divine founder and protector. This chapter explores the myth of Atlantis, its connection to Poseidon, and its legacy through time. The primary source of the Atlantis story comes from Plato. Poseidon's influence shaped every aspect of Atlantis. Though Plato likely intended the story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris, ancient readers treated it with more literal curiosity. For many, Atlantis was real. The connection to Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, provided a mythological explanation for the island's rise and sudden destruction. In some versions, Poseidon himself causes the downfall, angry at his descendants' betrayal of his principles. Over centuries, the legend of Atlantis grew beyond its Greek origins. Renaissance thinkers searched maps for the sunken city. In the 19th and 20th centuries, explorers linked Atlantis to civilizations like the Minoans, or theorized it was located in the Caribbean. While no archaeological evidence confirms its existence, the myth continues to inspire imagination and speculation. This chapter reveals Poseidon not just as a destroyer of cities, but as a creator of an island kingdom meant to embody divine order, which ultimately crumbled under human arrogance. Poseidon in literature and art, the eternal image of the sea god. Poseidon's image has endured for millennia, not only through myth, but also through the creative expressions of ancient artists, poets, and architects. From Homer's epics to classical sculpture, Poseidon was represented as both awe-inspiring and fearsome. In Euripides' play The Trojan Women, Poseidon opens the drama with a monologue lamenting the fall of Troy. He speaks not as a distant deity, but as one affected by war and divine politics. Such portrayals added layers of complexity to his character, blending majesty with vulnerability. This chapter explores how Poseidon was depicted across literature and art, preserving his legacy as the formidable god of the sea. In literature, Poseidon plays a central role in Homer's Odyssey. His grudge against Odysseus forms the backbone of the hero's prolonged journey home. After Odysseus blinds Polyphemus, Poseidon's son, the god unleashes storms and obstacles, delaying the hero for 10 years. In Homer's Iliad, Poseidon supports the Greeks during the Trojan War, clashing with Apollo and intervening in key battles. These epics present Poseidon as powerful, emotional, and deeply involved in human affairs. Greek dramatists also invoked Poseidon in tragedy and ritual. In visual art, Poseidon was often depicted as a mature, muscular man with a thick beard. Poseidon appears in sea chariots drawn by hippocampus, mythical creatures with the body of a horse and tail of a fish. These images decorated temples, villas, and public spaces, particularly in port cities where sea gods held special significance. Holding a trident, sometimes accompanied by dolphins, horses, or sea creatures, who maintained similar attributes, became an enduring symbol of the ocean's might. These works preserved not only his stories but the emotional weight. They carried reminders of the sea's beauty, danger, and divine mystery. Neptune became especially popular in Roman naval contexts and public fountains, such as the famous Fontana del Nettuno in Bologna and Rome, where he is often portrayed with flowing hair and commanding presence. One of the most famous sculptures is the Artemisian bronze, a larger-than-life statue believed to represent either Zeus or Poseidon. Dated to the 5th century BCE, the god stands poised, trident or thunderbolt once raised, a symbol of divine readiness. The power in his form reflects not only artistic skill but religious reverence. In pottery and mosaic, Roman culture later absorbed Poseidon as Neptune. This chapter highlights how Poseidon, through poetry, sculpture, and architecture, the legacy of Poseidon, from ancient myth to modern symbol. Even after the decline of ancient Greek religion, Poseidon's presence never faded. His name, image, and myths continue to influence modern culture, literature, psychology, and even science. This final chapter reflects on Poseidon's enduring legacy, how the god of the sea remains relevant in both historical understanding and contemporary imagination. He appears in literature such as Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, where he is portrayed as the father of the demigod Percy, a protector with a complex personality. In video games, movies, and animation, Poseidon often emerges as either a noble warrior or a wrathful force, his trident still an unmistakable symbol of oceanic power. Poseidon's symbolism as the embodiment of uncontrollable natural forces still resonates today. He represents not only the power of the sea, but also the emotional tides within human beings, instinctive and unpredictable. In modern psychology, Poseidon is often used as an archetype representing masculine emotional energy, powerful, but sometimes lacking control. The work of Carl Jung and later mythologists, like Jean Shinoda Bolan, identify Poseidon as a figure driven by feeling and passion, often in conflict with rational order. In popular media, Poseidon's character has been adapted into countless forms. Scientific naming conventions also honor him. The planet Neptune, named after the Roman version of Poseidon, reflects his dominion over the vast, mysterious realms, this time in the heavens instead of the sea. Similarly, sea creatures, underwater geological features, Poseidon regains symbolic relevance as a reminder of nature's dominance. While no longer worshipped with temples or sacrifices, the figure of Poseidon still commands respect, whether through literary metaphor, scientific reference, or collective human memory. And ancient ships have been named in homage to him, acknowledging his mythic authority over maritime history. Culturally, Poseidon remains a patron of sailors, divers, and ocean. Naval traditions, particularly in Western cultures, often reference Neptune or Poseidon during crossing the line ceremonies, where sailors symbolically enter his domain when passing the equator. From a powerful Olympian shaping myth and nature to a timeless figure influencing art, science, and culture, Poseidon's reach extends far beyond the foam of ancient seas. He remains, in spirit and symbol, the eternal ruler of the deep. This practice reflects a continued connection between maritime exploration and divine ritual. Moreover, as climate change increases the frequency of sea storms and rising tides, this concluding chapter brings the story of Poseidon full circle.